webinar series. My name is Andrea Gillespie, your host of the webinar series. I also serve as Senior Manager of Community Development at Charles Schwab Bank and as a proud board member of the Dallas Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning after a brief hiatus, and I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. On each episode of Housing for All, we discuss whether Dallas is big and if it is truly big enough for everyone by having impactful one on one conversations with members of the Dallas Housing Coalition and other community leaders who are Dallas's strongest advocates for keeping the city affordable. Joining me this morning is Van Parker. Van is the North Texas Managing Director of Housing Connector. In this role, Van leads programs, partnerships, and engagement strategies with a commitment to fostering housing accessibility in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Prior to joining Housing Connector, Van worked for a Fortune 100 company that relocated her to Dallas in 2014. In 2015, she made the decision to pursue real estate full-time. Van holds a bachelor's degree in marketing from Texas State University and has her real estate license. Van, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited for our conversation.
I am too, and I know a little bit about Housing Connector, so I'm excited to hear more from you and to, more importantly, have our viewers learn more about your organization as well. And with that, we'll just jump right in. And for those of us joining this morning or listening in at another time, Housing Connector is a very unique tech-powered organization. And I'm wondering, Van, if you can walk us through how Housing Connector's Zillow, that's right, you heard Zillow as in buying houses, marketplace works and what impact it has had so far in connecting individuals with affordable housing in Dallas.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Housing Connector is a really unique organization, like you mentioned. And so the way that we work is we have a partnership with Zillow, which allows us to list all of our property partners on Zillow for free, which is huge, right? I don't know about you, but I look at Zillow every day. I'm always looking at my own property value and the property value of my neighbors, but I'm always looking at Zillow. And so we have this partnership with Zillow that allows us to list our property partners. And when I use the word property partner, but that's basically just a housing provider on Zillow. And we also Housing Connector acts as the connection between property partners and community partners. So when we think of a community partner, we think of like a social service organization that is working with someone that is looking for housing. And so because we have this partnership with Zillow, we're able to list our properties on Zillow, which allows our community partners to easily use this platform and see properties that are willing to reduce their screening criteria for folks that might have a barrier. And what makes that really, really cool is that all of the properties that have agreed to reduce their screening criteria, they're also agreeing to work with folks that are trying to get back on the right track. And so our case managers have that relationship with these folks that are trying to do what they can, even though they might have a barrier in their past that is stopping them from being able to be approved for housing. And so because of that partnership, we're able to have like a centralized platform that case managers can use, easily find properties that are working with Housing Connector, and then match their clients to that property. So it's really cool. We've been in the Dallas market since 2023. Housing Connector is actually based out of the Seattle market and expanded to Dallas kind of in like a soft launch way last year. And in that time, we've housed our first couple of folks last summer, summer of 2023. And since last summer, we've housed over 550 people across DFW. So we're really proud of that, and we have a lot more work to do in Dallas.
That's great. So, if I'm understanding you correctly, because you're right, a lot of us who have bought a home or looking to buy have used Zillow as one resource to find homes in our price range in our area. But it sounds like what Housing Connector has been able to use is use that same platform, but in a slightly different way, where you have property managers that have units that need to be filled that agree to work with you to get those online,
Mhm.
and you're able to make sure that community members that need to get in those units are also able to use Zillow to look at what works for them. Is that right?
You got it.
Oh, fantastic. And I know we're going to talk more about, as the conversation unfolds, as far as how that looks and feels both for the property manager and the community member that needs housing.
Yeah.
But I want to talk a little bit first about how Housing Connector came to Dallas. I
Yeah.
understand the organization got its start actually on the Pacific Coast in
Yeah.
Seattle. And Dallas was an area that was attractive for Housing Connector to expand because of the city's high vacancy rates, but amid a time of substantial demand for a variety of housing options. And it sounds like there's a mismatch where you have vacancy rates and then you have people who need housing. And I'm just curious, why does this mismatch exist in Dallas or in other cities that you've been in?
That's a tough one, Andrea. It's such a great question. I think there's so many factors to it, right? Just to take us back just a little bit, as I mentioned, Housing Connector is based out of Seattle, but we were created by my founder, Skelton Kelmendi, and he is a refugee. So when he and his family were granted asylum, they were actually moved to Dallas, Texas. So he lived here for about 20 years or so. And it was challenging at first, right? It was really challenging for him and his family to find a property. They didn't know the language. They didn't meet the criteria, right, that we've set as far as application criteria goes, for someone to find housing. And then fast forward, in his adult years, moving off to Seattle and realizing they had similar issues, he's like, okay, now what is going on? Like, how can we help folks? Because there's so many people that need housing, just like you said, in that mismatch. But there's a lot of factors to that. And one that often comes to mind for us here at Housing Connector is the real risk and the perceived risk that comes along with affordable housing or workforce housing or whatever you want to call it, right? There's so many housing providers that have this stigma in their head of what that looks like and who those folks are that need housing, which makes it really challenging and really disheartening, right? Just as you mentioned, vacancy rates are up in Dallas, but there's so many housing providers that might rather just leave their unit sitting vacant than to rent to someone that is trying to get back on the right track that might have that less than perfect rental history. So that's kind of the first factor and the thing that I often see in the work that we do. And then Dallas specifically, which Seattle also has, but I would say affordability is a big one. I've lived in Dallas for just about 11 years now. And just as you mentioned, I've been a realtor for about a decade. I've seen the prices go up like crazy. And I think for Dallas, we have a lot of like the higher price class properties, the higher the luxury properties, but that might not be where the demand is, right? Like, I think more folks are really looking for affordable homes and affordable units that are in centrally located areas, right? Like, now you have to drive so much further out to be able to afford your home. So I think affordability is another big one too. And then lastly, I'd probably say preferences, right? Like, just like I mentioned, just wanting to be where you want to be. Like, you want to live, work, and play in the same area, and not have to go out too far. And just as you mentioned, like, Dallas really lacks that variety in housing options. So you have a single family home and you have a multifamily unit, and that's it. You really don't have anything in between. And so, especially for a lot of the growth that we have seen in Texas and in Dallas, people that are coming from elsewhere might not realize that, like, you really only have those two options and you only have those options, in those specific areas. It might not be in the desirable area that you are looking for. And I think that causes the units that are sitting in less desirable areas to sit vacant. So
Mhm.
those are the three big ones for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think you hit on a lot of key points there, which for what is driving the mismatch.
Mhm.
The first thing I heard was a poor or less than stellar rental history. What would be an example of a less than stellar rental history that a property manager would not normally want to look at?
Yeah, the big one that we see is eviction history, right? And even for myself, so I know we only have 30 minutes and I'm a chatty Cathy, so but I'll just kind of touch on my own life story. For myself, I grew up with a single mom, and my mom did a great job raising us, and she always wanted us to be in areas that had more opportunity, right? But what comes along with that is that higher price point. And so sometimes it was a challenge for us to remain stably housed. And so, when we got that eviction, now it's even more difficult to find our next place. And so we often see that as a big barrier for a lot of folks here. You get that one eviction, and whether it's, a wrongful eviction or whatever it may be, as soon as you get that mark, you're kind of in a situation that it makes it even more challenging for you. So that's a big one. And another thing that I would note, because I often see it, is credit score. I see things changing in the right direction in some ways, but I'd say credit score is another big one that we see from a lot of our applicants. And just going back to my mom's history as well, like that was the first thing that she would try to pay is our housing, right? Paying our rent was like, you got to keep a roof over your head. But sometimes, life happens, or sometimes maybe you miss that credit card bill and that affects your credit score. So those are two big ones that we often see.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I wanted to make sure, folks listening in have a good understanding of some of the challenges that people have that probably could pay for housing but aren't able to because of the second reason you brought up, which is that property managers may not want to deal with somebody who has a less than stellar rental history, and they make the choice to keep their units vacant for that reason until that perfect renter comes along. And then the third reason being just where people want to live. I know when I was choosing where I wanted to live, there were like a ton of factors that went into my choice: walkability, where the jobs were, how are the
Yeah,
schools, parks. Are there a lot of busy streets? All of those factors sounds like it plays into vacancy rates also, in the mismatch between the demand for housing options and the high vacancy rates.
definitely.
Great. Well, I want to go back to Housing Connector's model for a second. And based on your earlier comments, it really seems like Housing Connector has a laser focus on delivering simple and scalable solutions in the housing arena,
Yeah.
really until every person has a home that fits their needs. And I'm wondering, how has this focus been tailored to the local housing market in North Texas and particularly Dallas?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because a lot of things that we had to learn, I had to learn. I'm gonna call out just because like I said, we're based in Seattle, and we had this idea of what it would look like to do the same thing here in Dallas, and that did not work out, right? Like when I started, I've been with Housing Connector for about a year and a half now. And when I started at the organization, I started as our property partnership manager, given my background in real estate. And for me, I'm like, okay, I'm a good realtor. Like I got this. I'm in an apartment locator. Like everyone's gonna get a home when I get in this place, right? But what we quickly realized is that Seattle has source of income protection, which Texas and Dallas does not have. And for those that may not know, source of income protection basically means that a housing provider can't discriminate against someone that has, can't discriminate against where the source of income is or what it may be. So basically, if someone has a housing voucher, that still has to be considered. And Washington State has source of income protection. Denver is another market that we're in that has source of income protection. Portland has source of income protection. And Texas does not. And so, my first couple months here were a challenge. And it was really disheartening to me because I'm like, what the heck's going on? Like, am I not good at my job? Why can't we get folks housed? And the
Mhm.
challenging part is that, based on my own research, I found that only about 10% of multifamily properties across North Texas even accept housing vouchers.
Mhm.
So there's so many folks that it could take years to finally get that voucher. And then unfortunately, the voucher might expire because you can't find a housing provider that will accept it. And so, one thing that we had to really focus on was just, hey, we have to pivot our strategy and find something that works for the Dallas market, right? Dallas is not Seattle. Every market is different, and we really have to be involved in the community and know what the challenges are here. And so, when we opened up our strategy to say, folks in our program don't have to be necessarily someone that is currently experiencing homelessness, meaning that they're living in a shelter. They don't have to be someone that is um, uh, like that has a housing voucher per se. They just have to be someone that have a barrier to housing, right? So that barrier could be like we talked about. Maybe they don't make 3 times the rent, but they make 2 times the rent. Maybe they don't have the best credit score, but they're working on their credit. And, or maybe they've had an eviction in their past. So there's so many barriers to accessing housing. It's not just the housing voucher side. And so when we opened up our strategy to say, okay, we can work with anyone that has a barrier, right? Housing is a spectrum. We can help people along that spectrum. That's when we really start to see that growth. And that's when we were able to really bring more folks in. And just like I mentioned, we do still work with those community partners. We work with Austin Street, we work with Stew Pot, we work with Interfaith Family Services, and about 30 others across DFW. But we also work with like workforce housing organizations. We work for, workforce organizations and workforce housing organizations, and realtors and apartment locators as well. So just every side of it we can touch and say, hey, if you need help with housing, you can come to Housing Connector and we can help you with that. And that was really tailored to Dallas, right? So that's what I was getting at. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, because you had it sounds like you had the Dallas market, you had a very just real barrier of, of people having housing vouchers and them getting expired because
Yeah.
the market had a choice whether they get accepted or not, unlike in other cities.
Yeah.
That hurdle wasn't there. So with this very real hurdle, you had to figure out how to tweak the model. And it sounds like which leads to my next question, the major way that you kind of tweaked and adapted the model was like really connecting with those property managers, and understanding how they screen people,
Yeah.
what openings they have, and what would it take for them to work with a prospective tenant that is not quote unquote perfect with a perfect record.
Exactly.
And I'm just wondering if you can walk through what that looks like, where you have a property manager who's like, yeah, I'm willing to listen about your model. Like, how do you actually get them to work with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what makes Housing Connector so different is that we're really we sit in between the community partner and the property partner, right? And so we're able to see both sides of it. And just as you mentioned, we're really trying to figure out ways that we can bring benefits to that housing provider so that they feel more inclined to work with someone that has that less than perfect rental history. And so we do that in 4 main areas, right? For business outcomes that they think of is getting their rent paid, getting someone in that unit, right, that's going to pay that rent, protecting that unit because they don't want damages to the unit or to the community, and then also making sure that there's some stability there, right? Hopefully that resident is going to stay for a year plus. And
Mhm.
so when it comes to Housing Connector, we really go to that property partner and say, hey, this is a free referral for you, right? Anyone that's coming through our program has the means to pay their rent on their own. They just have that barrier, right? And so we're able to get that unit filled and get it filled with someone that can pay their rent. And we also provide up to $5,000 in damage mitigation as well. So if there are any damages to the property that exceed the security deposit amount, just come to Housing Connector, right? We will pay for those damages. And
Mhm.
ultimately, we do have a stability team here in-house, along with the person that's coming through our program also has a case manager. So we're here to make sure that we can be proactive and keep this family stably housed and ultimately keep your occupancy rates up.
Mhm.
So when we address those four areas, like I've mentioned, usually it's the bigger picture, it's the business outcome for that property manager. And to think that if life happens to one of our residents that we referred and we need to step in to make that financial payment or just step in if there's a lease violation, we'll do that. So a lot of times properties are like, okay, this sounds good. Like, oh, we would like to do this, right? At the
Mhm.
end of the day, it makes sense for them to have basically what I call an insurance policy, right? This is a free insurance policy. We understand that this is riskier for you to take on as a property owner or manager. And so for that reason, we're going to provide these protections to make sure that you remain whole.
That's great. I love how you walked us through each of the factors that enter the landlord's mind in terms of why I may not be able to do something, and then how your model basically has a tool to address every factor, like a rent guarantee, a guarantee for if something happens to the unit above and beyond the security deposit, a team of people who are making sure that once that person gets into the unit, they're going to be a successful tenant and a good decision for the property manager to have made. So really, thank you for walking us through that in such a clear and concise way. And so, given that you have been in Dallas for probably a little over a year now, right?
Yeah.
Um, what can you share an example of a successful partnership that you have really worked to forge and what that's looked like?
Yeah, definitely. So, just as I mentioned, I started as the property partnership manager. It's my job to really go out to the properties to get them to understand our program. Now I'm our managing director, but I still do a little bit of the property side as well. And then we have our community partnership manager. Shout out to Char McGill. She's amazing. She came from United Way and had so much knowledge and information about the community and about the resources that we could tap into. And so, one partnership, well, I guess I'd really say two partnerships that really helped us expand and really bring a lot of growth to the Dallas market was when we decided to shift and say, hey, we're going to open up and allow folks that have um, any barrier to come to our program, it was like, okay, well, who's going to handle the case management side of that, right? How are we going to get to these folks? How are we going to be proactive to know, okay, if something does happen, how can we step in, right? And how are we going to be able to give folks access? And it was really her idea to put the call out to community partners to say, is anyone willing to take direct referrals for us? And we found two community partners that were, which is huge for us. Having those case managers reach out. We have one in Dallas County, which is Brother Bill's Helping Hand, and Hope Restored Missions in Collin County. And so those case managers are incredible, and those organizations are incredible, and we really appreciate them taking our direct referrals because without that, we would not have been able to say, okay, like, let's do this. So that was really Chara's idea. And like I said, I'm really grateful to her for that ingenuity, but also to those community partners for saying, yeah, we can help you guys out because they already have so much on their own, right, through their own organizations going on. So to be able to help us out with the case management side is big. And for that reason, we were able to house, I think we're over 60 households or so just through those partnerships in the past year, which is huge.
That's wonderful. And as we round out this discussion, I mean, if it's not already apparent to our viewers today, it really seems like technology is the secret sauce of Housing Connector, in addition to obviously a high caliber staff and great partnerships and programs you've been able to leverage. But how do you see Tech for Good solutions, like what Housing Connector has been able to do with the Zillow platform, really be used to transform the affordable housing landscape in the coming years.
Yeah, I'm super excited about Tech for Good, right? Which is a new term for me to even know, to be honest. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing until I came to Housing Connector. But I'm super excited about where it's going because for me, I feel like Tech for Good just really means tech with a heart, tech with a human aspect to it. And I think the biggest part is really what we're doing with Zillow, right? Being able to give folks access easily, which is very difficult. I don't know any other platform that's like evergreen like ours that syndicates so that you can know that units are available right then and there, and you have that streamlined access to it. I don't know of any others. So I think that's a big one to really get started in the tech for good space, just streamlining the process, whether it's looking for homes or your application system, so on and so forth. And then I also think predictive analytics, right? Like at the end of the day, data is going to be a game changer for us and being able to get that data rapidly. And that's something that we're trying to do here at Housing Connector as well, right? Really dig into the numbers and see how we can be like forward thinking and be able to be proactive about, okay, this is a family that looks like they're going down this route that could lead to eviction. How do we step in with those resources? So I think tech is really going to be a big game changer in that realm and being able to give people more access and just streamline processes for everyone so that hopefully everyone has a place to call home.
I love that. Thank you so much. And you're absolutely right. I think um, um, definitely predictive analytics. I know a lot of issue areas like counseling, education, and whatnot are figuring out how to use that for good. So thank you for walking us through how technology can be used in that way. Before we round out and kind of finish our discussion, I'm wondering if there are any exciting developments or projects or initiatives that Housing Connector will be working on the coming year that you'd like to share with everyone.
Yeah, well, thank you for this. I've been so excited, so nervous about this, to be honest, but just so excited to have this conversation. I really want to say shout out to DHC because everything that you guys are doing is so incredible. And we need more of these conversations going on. And so Housing Connector is really honored to be a member of the Dallas Housing Coalition. But in addition to that, we're doing a lot for, for Housing Connector and for the Dallas community. I am actually representing Dallas. I'm representing Housing Connector in the United Way Social Innovation Accelerator. And that's a big one. So, I've learned so much about nonprofits, about fundraising, about pitching, so on and so forth. But I'm competing to be a finalist for what they call the pitch. And the pitch will be next April, if I make it through, fingers crossed. But they call it Shark Tank with a Heart. So I would be pitching to thousands of people or in front of thousands of people about Housing Connector. So we're super excited about that. United Way, Metro Dallas, United Way is like the pinnacle when it comes to nonprofits. So super excited to be a part of this cohort and really being able to learn from them. So that's a big one for us. And we did just have our launch event a couple weeks ago here in Dallas. So we're officially here. We're not going anywhere. We want to talk to all of the people. We want to talk to all of the organizations. We had Councilman West speak, which was big for us. Really appreciate his support. And then we also had a chief economist from Zillow kind of give us a little bit of backstory on the landscape where we're going forward. And so we're just excited, right? We're just excited to really get things going in the Dallas market and continue to move Dallas forward. But we need more property partners. We need more community partners. We need more funders. So please reach out to me. We really want to have those conversations and really get more involved in the community here. And then lastly, even though I know we're talking about Dallas, which that's where we live, that's where we love. But Housing Connector is expanding to Austin next quarter. So we're super excited about that as well.
Well, thank you so much, Van, for just sharing your unique perspectives on the housing market here in Dallas and how Housing Connector is addressing the challenges that property owners have or property managers have, as well as Dallas residents and those in Collin County and Dallas County are facing in their quest to find securable, affordable, and safe and stable housing. So thank you so much and good luck with the pitch and the social innovation experience at United Way and also the work that you're beginning to do in Austin. We wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Andy. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, before we end our webinar, I just want to remind our viewers of a few quick things. Make sure you follow Dallas Housing Coalition on all of its socials for learning about the ways that you can get involved in the work of the Dallas Housing Coalition, as well as staying connected to the Housing for All webinar series. While you're at it, make sure to visit the Dallas Housing Coalition at its webpage, dallashousingcoalition.com, so that you can learn about all of its member organizations like Housing Connector and formally join the coalition if you're not already a member. Thank you again for tuning in to another installment of our Housing for All webinar series. Believe it or not, we've done 32 of these conversations, and they all have provided such a unique spin and viewpoint and perspective on a housing access and affordability in Dallas. And with that, thank you for joining us where we talk about whether Dallas is big and if it is truly big enough for everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care.